Welcome to the debate. Today we're looking at a really potent quote from Karl Popper: "Science is the art of systematic oversimplification." And we're using this idea to examine the unified behavior model, or UBM, especially its core claim about elemental sufficiency. And, maybe more interestingly, the challenge the simplicity poses for, well, established experts in behavioral science. My position is straightforward. UBM really nails this scientific ideal. It delivers a genuinely profound, unifying simplification, a kind of foundational trunk for the field that's arguably been missing.
And I suppose I'm coming at this from a slightly different angle. While I absolutely acknowledge UBM's claims, the elemental sufficiency, the unification, the falsifiability, these are potentially huge contributions, no doubt. But my focus today is more on the, let's say, the human side of things, the inherent cognitive difficulties that experts, people deeply invested in current models, face when trying to fully embrace something so radically simple. It really is like asking someone fluent in several complex languages to suddenly return to and prioritize a new foundational alphabet, especially when their mental cup, so to speak, is already brimming with intricate knowledge.
Right, so the unified behavior model proposes that all human behavior, everything from a basic reflex right up to, complex strategic planning, it all stems from and can be understood through just four core recursive domains. These are our environment, and crucially, this includes our own physical body and its state. Then there's thinking, which covers cognition, internal narratives, the stories we tell ourselves. Third is behaviors, our actual habits, skills, what we do. And finally, emotions and feelings, those subjective states that give us important feedback. Now, this isn't just simplifying for simplicity's sake. It's positioned as a systematic oversimplification, a genuine scientific step forward, claiming elemental sufficiency, unification, and falsifiability. And these are aspects, frankly, that the source material argues have been lacking for, well, over 150 years in behavioral science. By elemental sufficiency, it means these four domains are presented as the fundamental, irreducible building blocks. Everything else, theoretically, can be derived or explained from these four. This lines up perfectly with Popper's idea of science, and it echoes Einstein too, doesn't it? Everything should be made as simple as possible, but not simpler. Now, importantly, while emotions and feelings are vital information sources, the model is explicit that for shaping long-term goals for intentional change, they carry less direct weight compared to tweaking your environment, changing your behaviors, or adjusting your thinking. And the model's rigor? It's demonstrated pretty boldly with the no fifth element challenge. Essentially, it dares anyone to identify a fundamental driver of behavior that cannot be reduced to or doesn't emerge from these four. It's a direct, falsifiable claim, grounding UBM firmly in scientific methodology.
Yeah, and I completely agree that those claims, sufficiency, unification, falsifiability, they represent potentially massive steps forward for behavioral science. Groundbreaking even. My perspective, though, zooms in on the sheer difficulty this presents for established experts. People who spent careers mastering the intricate details of existing theories. Learning UBM's core principles, these foundational ideas, it feels very much like trying to learn a new fundamental language. It often clicks much faster for beginners, maybe adolescents, people whose conceptual cups aren't already full. It makes me think of that Zen parable, the professor visiting the Zen master. The master just keeps pouring tea into the professor's cup long after it's full, making it overflow, to show you can't add new knowledge if you're already full of old ideas. Experts with cups overflowing with decades of specialized terminology, complex frameworks, ingrained ways of thinking, they paradoxically might struggle the most to really get this fundamental simplicity. The source material itself points out that UBM is designed as a foundational trunk complementary, meant to support the existing branches of theory, fostering collaboration, not conflict. And yet, I argue that the very simplicity making UBM potentially powerful for unification ironically acts as a significant psychological, maybe even sociological barrier for those deeply rooted in the complex, often fragmented existing models. It's not about whether UBM is right or wrong. It's about the human process of scientific change.
Okay, let's dig into that tension then. The
Complex, often fragmented existing models. It's not about whether UBM is right or wrong. It's about
UBM's reduction isn't just about being simple, it's about being sufficient. And that sufficiency is what enables a unified, goal-directed, and crucially falsifiable framework. This isn't just theoretical fluff, it has immense practical value. Look at the PARR methodology, for instance, PARR, developed by Martin Grunberg, that stands for Plan, Act, Record, and Reassess. It's a 28-day cycle for intentional habit tracking. What's powerful is that this process directly mirrors the scientific method, but applied to your own behavior. You plan an experiment, a new habit, you act on it, you record the data, track your progress, and then you reassess based on that data. It's systematic self-experimentation. And this really contrasts with, say, traditional habit loop models, which, as the source material points out, often stem from rodent studies. Now, those are valuable, sure, but they don't fully capture the human capacity for conscious intention, for reflection, for systematically iterating on our own behavioral plans. UBM provides the kind of theoretical backbone needed for a human-centric, goal-directed approach like PARR, empowering people to become, in a sense, their own behavioral scientists. The power isn't just the elemental simplicity on paper, it's how it works to create real, measurable change.
Right, I see that, and I absolutely acknowledge the elegance and the operational utility of UBM and PAR for individual change. It's clearly a structured, potentially very effective approach. Where I still get hung up, I suppose, is on the integration piece, particularly within the scientific community itself. The inertia of existing models, the fragmented nature of therapies, academic silos, it creates real resistance. The source material even says, quite pointedly, most behavioral scientists appear to miss the real reason UBM allegedly cracked the century-old mystery of unification. The answer is, literally, simple. It's elemental. Now, that's not saying UBM isn't rigorous. It's highlighting a cognitive hurdle.
But isn't that hurdle part of science?
Well, yes, but think about it. The detailed, specialized knowledge that experts have painstakingly built over their careers, it makes it genuinely hard for them to just, empty their cups and see behavior through this radically simplified lens. Especially when the answer is presented as being so basic, so fundamental. We're bumping up against the sociology and psychology of paradigm shifts here. Intellectual inertia is a powerful force. It takes more than just having a valid model. It requires a kind of re-education, a fundamental restructuring of how people think. And that's a tough sell, even for brilliant, open-minded people.
But surely the core of science, Popper's whole point, is to demand that we make room for more elegant, simpler explanations, right? Regardless of how attached we are to older frameworks. That's what falsifiability is for. The no fifth element challenge isn't just a slogan. It's a concrete structural test of UBM's scientific credentials. Popper was clear. A theory is scientific only if you can potentially prove it wrong. UBM says, okay, here's how. Find a fundamental driver of behavior that doesn't fit within environment, thinking, behaviors, or emotions, feelings. Take something like motivation. Seems fundamental, right?
A common candidate?
Exactly. But UBM argues it's not elemental. It's a result, a dynamic blend or derivative that emerges from the interplay within the four domains. As the source suggests, lack of motivation might stem from feeling physically unwell, environment, or telling yourself you'll fail, thinking, or feeling you lack the necessary skills, behaviors. This kind of direct, structural testability, elemental structure that can actually support the existing specialized theories and therapies, the branches. It's designed for collaboration, not replacement. It doesn't aim to throw out decades of research, but to unify it, to give it a common grounding. The goal is a shared, fundamental understanding that potentially strengthens all the specialized fields. It offers, let's say, more general, accessible principles that can bridge the gap between deep academic research and practical, real-world application. Think of CBT or ACT. They aren't replaced. They become sophisticated branches, operating perhaps primarily within the thinking domain of the UBM trunk, but now clearly connected to environment, behaviors, and emotions too. It acts like a map, a shared vocabulary, not a restrictive dogma.
That trunk analogy is powerful for envisioning theoretical integration. And yes, I agree, UBM's stated aim seems clearly complementary unification, not replacement. But the process of getting there, of achieving that integration within the messy reality of the scientific community, that's where the complexity lies. The cup is full issue isn't really a knock against UBM's validity or its collaborative intent. It's more a sociological, maybe psychological, observation about how science actually changes or resists change. The source material highlights, and I think this is critical, that it was the experts who struggled with the elemental simplicity of the model. This suggests that even though the model intends to be complementary, its sheer elemental nature creates real friction for people whose entire expertise, their careers, their identities as scientists are deeply woven into the intricacies of those branches.
Even if UBM would ultimately provide a stronger foundation for their own work, that initial reorientation, that step back to first principles, it requires a significant cognitive adjustment, a professional leap that, understandably, many find difficult. It really speaks to the human side of science. We get attached to our hard-won knowledge, even when something potentially more elegant or foundational comes along. The real question isn't just whether UBM can integrate, but how the community overcomes its own ingrained habits to let that integration happen.
So, to wrap up my side, I'd reiterate that UBM, through its systematic oversimplification of behavior into those four core elements, environment, thinking, behaviors, emotions, feelings, really does seem to fulfill that long-sought scientific goal of unification and clarity. It offers a potent, falsifiable framework that aligns beautifully with Popper's view of science as simplification, its elegance, its simplicity, that's actually its scientific sophistication. And it provides operational tools like PARR that yield tangible results. The key insight might be that sometimes real progress requires us to circle back to first principles, a process that might be, well, psychologically tough, but ultimately clarifying for a field that's been quite fragmented.
And I conclude by just reflecting again on that inherent human challenge involved in any scientific paradigm shift, especially one involving such a radical return to elemental basics. UBM's conceptual simplicity might well be its greatest scientific strength, yet, almost paradoxically, also its biggest hurdle for immediate, widespread acceptance among experts deeply versed in complexity. It truly is like the difficulties seasoned experts often face learning a completely new fundamental language, whereas beginners sometimes pick it up more readily. The struggle isn't necessarily with UBM's validity, but with our collective ability as a scientific community to sometimes empty our cups and embrace a perspective that is both foundational and perhaps revolutionary.
Yeah, it's a fascinating tension.
Scientific elegance on one hand, and our very human cognitive resistance to paradigms that simplify, even when that simplification is powerful. Exploring those human dynamics further alongside UEM's specific claims definitely seems worthwhile.